Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Dennis. Can you tell us how you ended up at La Salle Military Academy? That had to be, I know that was a long way from, we were in Huntington Bay, and I know that was in Oakdale, so that was a bit of a commute.
Well, I didn't commute. That's a boarding school.
Mhm.
Uh, After I graduated from grammar school, which mom and dad weren't sure I was going to do, they both recommended that LaSalle Military Academy would be a good place for me to go. And so I found that out after I graduated from grammar school, sometime in the summer. But I never got to see the school until the first time Pop took me there. And the school was in Oakdale, uh, South Shore, Long Island. And he dropped me off at what's called St. Joseph's Hall, which is a big building, which had all the barracks and all that stuff in it. And as I said goodbye to him with my bag full of underwear and socks, he said, "They tell me if you're good and you don't get in trouble, you can get home next week. So call us by Wednesday." So that was my introduction to La Salle Military Academy.
How is it you think they decided to send you there?
Well, I was getting in what you would call uh, mischief
Mhm.
of different kinds. And they had 7 other kids to worry about. So, no, they didn't have seven then. How many did they have?
Seven, they had eight
Yeah,
altogether.
yeah, they had 7 other kids. So, uh, I think that was a way of giving me an opportunity to get some discipline and some regimentation on not just schoolwork, but on life in general.
There's a legend within the family. I don't know that it's true or not, but I'd be interested in your take on it. That when you graduated from St. Patrick's, and they had a special mass, and at the point where you got your grammar school diploma, your parents shook hands in the back of the church.
I think we have a picture of that.
Okay. So you mentioned that you thought maybe they sent you to LaSalle because you could use some structure and some discipline. Do you think, when you reflect back on your extensive military career, do you really view LaSalle as the beginning of the career? The fact that the military was such a strong influence in that school?
Not at first. Really started my senior year. After football, I was really applying to try to get a scholarship, football scholarship, and it involved a number of military schools, and uh, that's that started my thoughts on being in the military. I always thought that every American able-bodied guy owed the country a couple of years service.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one of my driving forces. And the other was that I felt LaSalle really prepared me well for a military school. So that's how we got along in that direction. And
So if I
The
hold, hold,
Citadel,
hold on, stick to LaSalle for a second. So when you basically your senior year of LaSalle that really got you thinking about a military career, and not the.
yeah, well, not a career. It got me to think about going into the
Mm-hmm.
military college, and
Mm-hmm.
military after that, but not for a career. I didn't come up with a career until after I was on active duty for a while.
Okay. I interrupted you. You started talking about Citadel.
Well, I was going to tell you that LaSalle really prepared me well for the Citadel,
Mm-hmm.
and any successes I had down there, I attribute to uh, what I learned at the Citadel. I learned at LaSalle.
And you still have classmates from LaSalle that you're close with, aren't you?
Some, most of them have passed away, but I still have some. Yes.
And I remember as a kid, and when you went to the LaSalle, I was a little kid, maybe 5 to 6 years old. And I do remember there seemed to be a strong South American influence at LaSalle.
Oh yeah, we had Colombians, we had Dominican Republic, we had Puerto Rico, we had uh, El Salvador. We had a lot of different foreign students.
Mm. And as I got older, maybe I'm not necessarily wise, I got older in life and started to look at cultures and the way cultures are set up. I look back at my experience from you and all those Latin Americans at LaSalle, and it reminded me that LaSalle was a military school, but yet it was run by the Brothers de La Salle. So I think of the two structures within South America that are the most important in terms of maintaining order and the setup of the government. It always seems to be some combination of the military and the church.
Yeah. Well, it worked out pretty well. I was wondering how it was going to work when I got there. After I found my room and met my 7 roommates, I was in my first room, my freshman year. There were 8 of us in that alcove room, and but it worked pretty well. We called them monks. They were brothers, Christian brothers, and they each company had a prefect that was a monk that slept and stayed in the area where your company was, and then they taught all our classes. And military time, we had an active duty military cadre that taught us the basics of, marching, shooting, drill, tactics,
Mm-hmm.
and Clausewitz and all these other uh, military things that, again, I say really helped me when I got to the Citadel.
You mentioned the term you used was monks, or I guess it's called the brothers. Were there any particular brothers that, as you look back on it, who really stuck out as having had an influence on you and some of the lessons you learned from them?
I would say Brother Michael, who was in his late 20s, I met my freshman year. He was, besides being a good friend, he was a jock. He was like 6'2", and also a super teacher and brother. He was a good Christian brother. And lo and behold, he died of cancer at the end of my sophomore year.
Mm.
And the other brother that I was pretty close to, who kept after me for 42 years, was Brother John.
Mm-hmm.
You might have heard.
I remember he came to our home a few times, as I recall.
Yeah. And the lessons that I got from those guys, humility, a deeper faith, hard work, leadership, courage, forgiveness, and of course, sports.
Mm.
Those are the main things that I learned from those guys, and I still miss them.
That's quite a legacy when you remember a brother who was 20 years old, and
he's in his late 20s.
Yeah, and the lessons you learned from them. Interesting, in terms of the role of the military. I don't know how accurate it is, but the new Secretary of Defense says we want to make the U.S. the most lethal force out there. And the Bible, of course, you were well familiar with the 5th commandment, thou shalt not kill. And obviously, the military and your Roman Catholic faith have been driving force in your life. How do you reconcile those two forces?
I don't know if reconcile is the right word for me to use. I don't have a problem with it. The duty, honor, country, easy for me to understand, considering I've been a practicing Catholic since baptism.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had a problem understanding that God loves soldiers as much as he loves shoe salesmen, and that both the New and the Old Testament have many chapters devoted to a relationship with a Roman soldier or a centurion that Jesus saves the life of his son. And you look throughout history, And many of the leaders, historically, many of the leaders uh, were soldiers at one time,
Mhm.
you know, whether it was uh, Augusta, whatever, and they combined their religion and their war fighting. Uh, I think that if the stronger your faith, the easier it is to deal with, having to shoot at someone before they shoot at you,
Mm.
or as we used to say, we're just returning friendly fire. You know,
I remember when I wrote the poem about you and Mickey Mantle, Mickey and the General, I became aware of your being recognized by the Order of St. Michael, which to my knowledge seemed to combine faith and service. Can you talk a little bit about the Order of St. Michael and the award you were won from them and why they chose you?
well, the Order of St. Michael is an Army Aviation Award. You don't get it from the Marines. You don't get it from a different branch. You got to be an Army aviator to receive the Order of St. Michael Award. And it's awarded for people that go above and beyond with innovation for the Army aviation community uh, and doing outstanding works that makes Army aviation better. And so there are three basic awards. The first award, the lowest award, is called the Bronze Award. The second is the Silver Award, and the top one is the Gold Order of St. Michael. And they're presented by Army Aviation of America, which is an association that's got to do with aviators. And, uh, and they're very closely aligned with the branch, aviation's branch itself. So I was fortunate enough, I got the Silver Award uh, earlier in my career for some stuff I was working on. And and then in my later part of my career, they awarded me the Gold Award. So I've got the Silver and the Gold Awards of St. Michael
And when you
for
got to,
stuff I was for stuff I was doing, whether it was uh, radar altimeters, with night vision goggles or munitions for the Apache, whatever project I was working on. Uh, the people I was working for thought that I deserved to be recognized in a special way. So that's why I got those two awards.
and the Order of St. Michael, that is modeled under St. Michael the Archangel. Wasn't he the one that
Yes,
led the angels in
yes,
the defense?
yeah, yep, yep.
And
That's who it's that.
what's the connection between him and the aviation? Just the fact that he was in the heavens.
Well, uh, the fire department has got, you know, uh, I forget which saint they kind of fall in on, but
Mhm.
each many different organizations. Uh, I was reading about Saint Joseph last night, and I forget which organization zeroes in on him. But so Army Aviation is no different, and they picked a guy that was associated with combat, you
Mhm.
know, St. Michael. And so they wanted to have some awards. Aviation wasn't a branch when I first came in. I was an armor officer,
Mhm.
and I converted to be an aviator uh, after my first trip to Vietnam. And uh, so I think they selected, that was a good choice. I think St. Michael was a good choice.
It's often, I've never been to war. I've actually been on a faith journey, which you've seen at different points in my life. Um, but I know one of the things you often hear about people who have been to war, and certainly you've been to war several times, is that there are no atheists in the foxhole. You talked about your first tour in Vietnam, which obviously was a big deal in your life. What role did faith play in your first tour?
Uh, I think it played it was a important part. You know, my first tour in Vietnam, I started my first Army career assignment in Germany. And shortly after I got there, and shortly after my wife and I got married, uh, people started getting pulled out of Germany and sent to the units that were going to go to Vietnam.
Hmm.
It was during the buildup, and many of those officers that were there when I first arrived, you know, 5 months later, they were getting orders to go to Vietnam to serve with the Vietnamese
Hmm.
as advisors and whatever. I didn't want to do that. If I was going to go to Vietnam, I wanted to go to a combat unit, U.S. combat unit. So I put in a request to do that, and
Hmm.
it was approved. And so they scheduled me to go from Germany, a couple schools, and then to Vietnam to a U.S. unit, and that's what happened. And I became a company commander in an armor battalion, and I had tanks and personnel carriers and ground surveillance equipment and mortars. And that was I got there 3 weeks before Tet of
Hmm.
1968.
Right.
So that was quite a battle that we had throughout Vietnam.
Right. But
Uh,
getting back to the role of faith, and that's your career is fascinating on many levels. But faith, if you think about your experience there as a young man, how did faith help you get through it?
well, I felt Jesus kept me alive.
Hmm.
I thought I was going to be dead before 25.
Hmm.
Uh, how I got through not just that assignment, but all the other ones I had over there without taking a bullet is beyond me. I don't know how that happened. Uh, not too many people can say that, but I can say I did not. I had some bullets coming through helicopters at my personnel carrier, at my foxhole, but I was never hit, and I
Hmm.
always kept Jesus in mind, and he was sort of my uh, guardian angel. You know,
Hmm.
uh, I like to think that we keep Jesus in our heart,
Hmm.
and uh, I keep the Holy Spirit on my right shoulder, and I keep my guardian angel on my left shoulder, and that's that always gives you a little inspiration when you're facing some difficult tasks, and it's raining, it's nighttime, you're on a mountain that's 3,500 feet in the air, and you're taking water fire, and you don't know where it's coming from. So what do? You hug the tree that you're hanging from, and, and you say some prayers and ask Jesus to get you through the day.
Hmm.
So I thought a lot and concentrated a lot. I wasn't necessarily saying more prayers, but I always had the Holy Trinity in my mind every day.
Hmm. How did you practice your faith in Vietnam? Was it possible to go to mass? You
Well,
mentioned
we
tent
didn't have
events.
a
And,
chaplain. We didn't have a chaplain in my first year assignments over there. So when I was in that tank battalion, no chaplains. But every once in a while, we'd be near a facility that had a chaplain.
hmm.
And as long as it was a Christian service, many of my men and I would go to that service.
Hmm.
Other than that, it was principally our our Bibles. Uh, the Army produced a lot of these little reading pamphlets for servicemen, religious pamphlets.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and then when I was an advisor that year, they made me an infantryman my last 4 months. And when my team would get near a town and there was a church,
Uh-huh.
uh, we would attend that service. So about twice a month as an infantryman, I got to go to a cathedral or a church, Catholic church.
Hmm.
And but that was not the normal.
And with the services that the Catholic masses that you went to in the local churches, were they in Vietnamese or in French?
Yeah, they were in Vietnamese.
And did that before or after Vatican? Had they changed things with the Vatican II? Had influence been felt there, where the mass had changed the structure of it? You don't remember,
I just remember it was easy to follow the mass.
right?
I don't,
Yeah, the fact
whether
that it was in Vietnamese and not Latin would suggest that it was, affected by Vatican II.
yeah.
Services in the local.
Well, it was in Vietnamese, so you're probably right.
Mm. Yeah, I remember going to, Sue and I like to travel, and so it's easy when we go to the Caribbean and we go to service because they're in English. But when, been in France and Spain, and I remember going to mass in different countries, and it's how you can follow along. When you know what's going on. It's just the language is different. So,
Well, our grammar school taught us a lot of Latin,
mhm,
St. Patrick's. And
mhm,
of course, this was years later. So it's just like I went to college and in high school, I took French and Spanish.
uh-huh,
The French helped me a little bit when I was on my first tour, and I got to work with, my 350 mountain yards, uh, because the Jurai mountain yards spoke French,
mhm,
and I could get a message to these guys through my interpreter, and together we would be able to get the point across to the people that we had to take to war.
mhm.
So that was a challenge. But no, my faith was very important in my time in service.
Can you think of one example where it really took something, it was difficult to get to mass or to get to service and you did in the midst of battle or anything like that? Have an example?
No, 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 no. The war came first.
Hmm.
So there were times that we thought we were going to be going to a service, and we didn't go because of the circumstances that we found ourselves in.
Hmm.
You know, you can't tell the enemy, "Hey, we're going to have take an hour off. We're going to church." Doesn't work that way. It
Mm.
might have worked that way in certain Civil War battles, but
Right.
didn't work that way in Vietnam.
Yeah. When you were in Vietnam the first time, I was in grammar school, and obviously, the war was quite controversial. And within the Catholic Church, you had both sides. You had those factions of the church that were very much in favor of the U.S. involvement, those who were very much against it. Um, as a Catholic, did you ever get any pushback from fellow Catholics in terms of being in the war?
I might have got a little challenge. Uh, Never criticized. Uh, uh, there might have been one or two times where someone was pure anti-war.
Hmm.
Uh, the way that I really felt that the first time was when I came back from Vietnam
Hmm.
and my plane landed in San Francisco Airport,
Hmm.
and then I had to get on another plane to get to Kennedy.
Hmm.
But I was in my uniform, and people were throwing stuff at us, had anti-war signs and all that kind of stuff, and it was a shock to me,
Hmm.
uh, because I was removed from all that anti-war stuff when you're in a war.
Right.
And even though we had many, many draftees then uh, in Vietnam, I'd say half my unit was drafted.
Hmm.
And so many of those guys, no women were in my unit because it was a combat unit. And at that time, women were not allowed in combat. Uh, and I thought that was a good move. And I had enough problems worried about my soldiers and the locals. Anyway, the the thing about the concentration of your thoughts were really focused on, okay, what's my mission? I got to make sure I have my mission covered all the time.
Hmm.
whether I was either in the outhouse or eating breakfast. I had to worry about that perimeter or that mission that we were going to go on. Like we had a night river crossing, which was kind of exciting uh, with my tank unit. Uh, we had some self-propelled uh, bridges
Hmm.
that traveled on tracks, and they'd go 60 feet.
Mm.
But you got to have, at least 5 feet, 4 feet on each side of the bank for that thing to work.
Right.
So
So when
you
you
could,
came back, and I heard that story before when you arrived in San Francisco, those were not people who were identified with the church. That was just generic person.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
The
you never
church,
had, yeah.
most of the churches we went to were on a military base when I was,
Right.
and those chaplains didn't talk anti-war.
Hmm.
Uh, and But back in the States, you pick up the newspaper, you couldn't turn on your computer because we didn't have them. You turn on the TV or your newspaper, and you see Walter Cronkite talking about how the war is over.
Hmm.
Like, for example, I told you the Tet Offensive was horrendous, but we beat the hell out of the VC and the NVA.
Hmm.
And But the news back home said we lost the war.
Yeah.
We lost the battle. And there were many incidences. Later on, there was a big battle called a campaign called the Counter May Offensive of '68. I got involved in that one too, and we beat the hell out of the. Uh,
Mm.
After that battle, I never saw a VC battalion again.
Yeah.
They were lucky if they could muster a platoon.
Yeah. We're coming up to the end of our time, and I wanted to get back to your faith journey. If you had a looking back, obviously, we're recording this interview in 2016, and we're talking about your experience in Vietnam, which I believe was 68, 67, 68. If you look back on your faith journey, um, what has been the impact of Vietnam on your faith journey? How has that caused you to think differently about faith or inform your faith? Or are there lessons from things you learned in Vietnam that you apply to your faith life?
Well, I think it, it, it taught me more patience. Um, it definitely taught me more forgiveness. And I think it taught me more love, more intensive love of my family. And Because when you're without them and you're getting shot at, you don't know if you're going to get up in the morning. Uh, uh, that really paid a big influence on my faith.
Mm-hmm.
My faith helped me out. You I was reading something in my missal this morning about the Hebrews 11:1 to 8. Faith is the realization of what to hope for and evidence of things not seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely had that come back in spades while I was in Vietnam.
Mm. And last question, and to conclude here, and it's probably related to your last answer, is how has your faith informed how you lead troops, how you command troops?
Well, I think your faith in if you're in the army and in a leadership position uh, has you better understand the fact that you know you better know your responsibilities. If you're a good leader, you're going to lead from the front. You're going to set the example, treat everyone with respect, and keep Jesus as the center of your universe.
Right. Okay, well said. We're at 29 and a half minutes, so we did well to fill the half hour, and I thank you for this. I'm going to turn off the recording now.